So I am Jennifer Crosbie. I am a clinical psychologist and researcher at Sick Kids. I've been involved with Pond for almost 10 years now, right from the beginning of when Pond started. And for those of you who were participated in the Pond parent event this year, you may remember we were going to actually do this parent stress management as a workout group, or a breakout group as part of that. And we had so much great science to talk about, and we really wanted to hear from our parent and youth pack. So we ran out of time. So we decided to do this series online. And I actually am really glad that we did it, because I think it's allowed potentially more people to participate. And it's an opportunity for us to maybe share the session on the Pond website. So welcome, everybody. So the topic is parent stress management. And I would definitely want to leave some time at the end to discuss. Melanie and I are going to try to do one or two interactive things. But I kind of sprung the idea on Melanie right before we started. So if it doesn't work, don't worry, but it would be great. There might be just a couple of times where we'll get you guys to see if you want to type something in to share your reflections. But really, I just wanted to highlight some of the concepts that can be helpful for parents in managing stress, and some tips and strategies that you guys can employ. We have an hour, but I'm going to try to keep the content not too long so we have time for discussion. If you have any burning questions, I believe the chat is live. I won't be able to see the chat, but Melanie will. So if you're having major issues, she'll keep an eye on that, and she can probably try and help you out. So I took this picture here. It kind of reminded me of, parenting is hard. And these sort of made me think of like steps that you could walk on. And we've all walked on surfaces, whether it's a trampoline or pebbles on a beach. And, if you're on a trampoline or even on a beach, you can get a really good stride, and you can kind of be, hopping from stone to stone, and it's going really well, and you feel really in control. And then there's other times, whether it's on a beach and some of the rocks are wiggly, or you're on a trampoline and you feel like you're really out of control. And I think parenting's a bit like that. I think sometimes we can think about it and concentrate, and we can really kind of find our stride even when things are difficult. And then other times we feel like we're really off kilter and out of balance. So tonight is really intended to kind of give some tips and strategies about how, even when things feel a little rocky and out of control, we can try some things to maybe get the ground beneath our feet to be a little bit more stable, even if we know that, we're managing lots of different things. So see if I can get through my slides. They're not progressing. Give me a second. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Ooh, yeah. Okay. So parenting stress, you know what? Throughout this talk, sometimes I'll talk about young children, but really this goes across the lifespan. And actually, I think it probably goes into parenting young adults as well. So sometimes I'll say young children, sometimes I'll say teens, and it's really meant to be quite inclusive. Another thing I should share with you all, so I'm a psychologist and a scientist, but I also have a teenager at home who's neurodiverse, and he's definitely throwing me lots of curveballs these days. So while I'm going to share these tips, I'm definitely one of the people and one of the parents who themselves feels a little off kilter, and I have to think myself, how am I gonna manage my stress to get this ground feeling less wobbly. So parenting is intense and demanding. And so it's intense for young children, and then it's actually quite stressful and demanding in different ways as kids get older. So parents and teachers and caregivers are all have many demands. So as parents, we're dealing with our household, with our kids. Sometimes we have jobs. Sometimes we have our own parents, and there's lots of things to manage. Like stress is natural and inevitable, but if it's too much stress, it will start to take a toll on your health and ultimately the effectiveness that you have as a parent or a provider or a spouse, or it'll take a toll on all those relationships, but specifically in how we parent and how we can sort of best support our youth and children. So when we think about stress and why when we take time to think about ways that we can manage our own stress, you really want to stay on top of that, because when we're stressed, it impacts those around us, our teens, our youth, and everyone that we interact with. So it's very important that we are aware of how we're feeling, how stressed we are, and that we take the time to manage that, because otherwise everything gets off kilter. And if you imagine you and your children and your family all on that trampoline together, if it's bouncy and you can't get it under control, then that's going to ripple and have an impact on everybody who's on that ground with you. All right. These slides are a bit sticky tonight. I apologize, guys. 1 second. Oh, see, look at that. All right. I'm just trying to make sure you guys are awake. Let me see if I can get this to move a little bit more smoothly. There we go. Okay. So you know what? Being a parent is hard. Parenting children with neurodiversity can be harder. And, people have ideas of parents. People see other parents. We see TV shows about parents. We see social media about parents, and it all looks great. But parenting is hard, and it's often different than what we expect and different than this idyllic moment. However, there's also really great moments. There's lots of wonderful elements about being a parent. It's very rewarding. You have these relationships with wonderful people. So you really got to acknowledge that it's hard, while also acknowledging that there's many good things, and then figuring out how to manage. So why should parents focus on their own stress management? Well, we know that when caregivers are stressed, when parents are stressed, it's more difficult for them to offer praise, to give the structure and nurturance that might be needed for children and youth. We know that when people are stressed, we all know this, when we're stressed, you're more likely to say maybe harsh things, whether it's to like a spouse or a family member, but also with your children and youth. And when children and youth are in an environment where the caregivers are stressed, that can often lead to more challenging behaviors. And so as parents, we want to be supporting our youth and kind of helping them to regulate their emotions. So it's really important for us to regulate our emotions as well. So what is stress? So stress is a physical, mental, or emotional response to events that are causing bodily or muscle tension. It comes from a situation or a thought that makes you feel frustrated, nervous, anxious, or angry. It can be a good thing, and we can talk about situations like that, but it can also be a bad thing. So what's harmful stress? Harmful stress is the kind of stress that would be helpful to limit and learn to manage in a healthy way. So good stress might be like, oh, I got to get going. I was late today, and, motivating us to maybe make changes or get things done. But harmful stress actually shuts us down. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight, like why it is that we get shut down, and then ways in which we can buffer that stress. So common sources of stress for parents. And I'm going to put Melanie on the spot here. I'm just going to go back to this one and see whether or not it's possible for us to get people to add in some responses about what kinds of things cause them stress. And Melanie, if it doesn't work, oh, there we go. And actually that wasn't, you know what? Let's go with the question that she has here. So number one is, how do you know when you're stressed? So it might have popped up on your screen. Let me see if I can answer it. So Melanie, launch, let's see. So on my side, at my end, I can't see answers, but maybe we'll wait a little bit. For some reason, it's not letting me put in a response, but it looks like it's letting you guys put in a response. So that's the most important thing. I was going to put in some of my own examples, but I can say those out loud. Why don't we start with the 8 that are up there? Is there a way for me to see those, Melanie?
I think once we end the poll, the answer
Okay.
should pop up.
Okay, perfect. Great. So there's another question that you guys can answer, and we'll maybe come back to that. What do you do to manage your stress? Let a few more people get some answers in there, and we'll sort of see what kind of comments people have added in. And I can share some of the things that I know when I'm stressed. Oh, look, people commenting. All right. All right, I'm going to end the poll, Melanie, and then maybe we can see the results. Let's see. Oh, share results. Let's see if this works. Melanie, are you seeing the responses on your side?
I am not.
All right. This has been. All right, you know what? I'm going to continue, and if Melanie figures that out for us too, it looks like it's sharing with you guys, but it's saying it's sharing with you guys, but I don't think you're able to see it. All right, so maybe I'll just share some of my reflections before I get into.
Sorry to interrupt. We can see it.
You can see it.
Yeah, it's there. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's okay. It's mysterious. We can, you know, since you volunteered, can you read off some of the ways in which people have said, how do they know when they're stressed?
Well, actually, it just gives like my response, but then it shows that 95% completed it, and the first question, and 74% completed the second.
Okay, I see that. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
So maybe what I'll do is I'll share some of the things about how I know when I'm stressed. I know when I'm stressed because I get a lot of muscle tension in my neck. I can't sleep. I grind my teeth. And also like I you know, I feel frustrated and I get very short-tempered. I know that. I know when I feel stressed, I get very short-tempered. And maybe some people said those kinds of comments as well. So I'm going to close this off now. And I'm going to go to the next page, which sort of talks about sources of stress. So as a parent, some of the sources of stress are tension between schools and teachers or your caregivers, too much to do and no time to keep up. Too little help or too few caregivers. If you're co-parenting, maybe that's not enough, or maybe you're single parenting, having no time for yourself. Children and youth need things immediately, and we're not able to do that. Environmental issues, noise, lack of space, disorganization, individual concerns like family finances. It could be health of you or a co-parent. Lack of clear communication within a family, maybe with a co-parent or with a care team, having no opportunities for your own personal enjoyment and development, so not having enough time for yourself, and feeling like you've no control over the key factors in your life. So these are some common sources of parental stress. And we know that with kids who have diverse health and mental health and neurodiversity needs, that many of these become even greater and bigger. So what are some common symptoms of stress? So when we're feeling stressed, it can interfere with your memory, it can interfere with concentrations, Anxiety and worries can get out of control. You can have racing thoughts and having difficulty kind of keeping up with the ideas in your head. Emotionally, you can feel down, overwhelmed, irritable, unable to relax. Physically, you could feel like you're sweating, chest pains, frequently feeling ill, headaches, nausea, dizziness. And behaviorally, you can have increased or decreased appetite. You might develop habits. That's another tell for me when I'm feeling stressed, is that I don't generally kind of bite or pick my nails, but I'll look down and suddenly I don't have any nails and I don't actually even remember what happened to them. Difficulty regulating sleep. That could be sleeping too much, sleeping too little, or, finding yourself kind of falling into maladaptive strategies. So, maybe drinking 1 or 2 more drinks than you used to, cigarettes, or using drugs. So these can be symptoms of stress and ways in which stress can impact us, and then what the response can be. When we're calm as parents, and I think everyone on the call here will know this, when you're really feeling calm and not stressed, even when the situation around us is stressful, it's easier to figure out a solution. You have more bandwidth, more capacity, more attention to deal with roadblocks, whether they're in the system or with problems right in front of you at home. You've got much more patience for everyone who's involved. And so by starting here, by understanding that we want to get ourselves back to a point where we're not stressed so that we can apply all these great tools to deal with what's going on, we can start to think about how to manage our stress and to be on top of it and make it not feel so overwhelmed by stress. So we're going to talk about that today. So regulation. So regulation is the body's ability to return to a calm state after stress. It's an automatic process. So it's a time when our systems are in balance and we're functioning at our best. So our body does want to get us back to a point of regulation, and that's important. And there's processes that our bodies do that help us do that. And some of the strategies I'm going to give you activate those systems. So generally, you want to get your body back into a regulated state. As parents, when things are out of control and everyone is stressed, the first person you want to deal with is yourself. So first, you want to get your own stress under control, and then you can help your family manage their own stress, their own nervous system. And then once you're calm and you feel like you've been able to kind of manage some of the factors in the environment, then you can help your children or your youth come up with strategies to manage their own stress. So homeostasis is this idea that your body is going to try to get itself back into a regulated position. And what we know is that what goes up has to come back down, except when it doesn't. So, we all know, you have a flare up and you come back down again. As parents, what we want to monitor is when we have these periods of going up and being stressed, but we never actually quite come back right down, and that we're sort of bubbling along and maybe we're managing our stress a little bit, but not entirely. And when you're not managing and stress entirely, maybe you're just keeping the top on the bottle, we're much faster to then get stressed and to blow up ourselves. So our body's made up of 2 systems, the sympathetic system. So that's what your body does. That's like fight or flight. When you perceive a threat, when you get stressed, when things kind of boil over, your body sends you off into fight or flight. Your parasympathetic system actually calms you down. The system sends resources to slow things down, to help your breathing and get you back into a resting state. So the parasympathetic system is good for you. It actually helps you to relax and be less stressed. And I'm going to kind of pick that up a little bit later. Freezing means that actually the stress was so big that you kind of shut yourself down. And, kids sometimes go through that. Definitely kids who are neurodiverse. You can see there's like a high state and then maybe a bit of a shutdown. And as parents, you don't want that to happen. You don't want to either get stuck in fight and flight mode, and you don't want to calm down so much in response that you actually just sort of freeze and feel like you're immobilized. What you want to do is get yourself provide tools to get yourself in this like nice, calm period where you feel in control. So this sort of shows like how things are. You have a situation and the setting, and usually what you want to do is you want to be tolerating the stress. So what we call it the window of tolerance. When things are not too stressful, we stay in the window. We got some strategies, we apply them, we maybe get a little bit stressed, but that's okay. We apply some things, we use some tools, and we kind of stay within there, and we kind of use that as like a positive level of stress. That's how we keep regulated it, because that's what I said. Stress is normal. There's always going to be stuff we got to deal with. Nobody's life is flat with no stresses. That just doesn't exist. The problem is that, there's not a problem yet, but when we're in this window of tolerance, we feel in control. We can use our words, phrases we use with our kids, make good choices. So like, think about what the end goal is. Think about, hey, if I say this, maybe it'll do that. Do some planning. These are examples that we mostly use for kids here, but it could be, staying on top of what needs to be done, multitasking. You're also able to connect with family and friends, be interested in new things, and calm down when we get upset. So that's where you want to be, in the window of tolerance. Be able to take things that come up, and also be able to enjoy life and be able to like do the things that are important for you. The problem is that most of us in our busy lives, particularly with kids and youth, and particularly kids and youth who themselves might have their own stress and struggles, are outside this window of tolerance most of the time. And so we kind of bounce back and forth between being stressed and then being maybe even too low and exhausted. And so we're never quite in that middle zone. What goes up's got to come down, and we're never quite getting in that zone where we want to be. When you're outside that zone, either too high or too low, it becomes really hard to regulate our behavior. So even if you're too high, maybe you're gonna kind of yell or be stressed. And if you're too low, you might just be too tired and exhausted to kind of mobilize and get things done. And you might start to feel like overwhelmed and say, it's not worth it. I won't get any of it done. So what we want to do is we want to really get ourselves within the zone. Sometimes we can use these sort of temporary approaches, and that can kind of manage things. That's sort of like keeping the top on the bottle. But when we do that, when we're sort of like just managing the situation as it comes, but we're not feeling in control, you either get kind of chaos and overwhelmed and this collapse, and I can't. So what you want to do is put some strategies in place, and we'll talk about them tonight, to make that zone where you can be mostly. And you know what, it's mostly, because often, no matter what happens, there's always going to be times when we kind of go over and we go below, but you generally want to feel like you have a toolkit and strategies to keep yourself in that zone, and actually to make that bandwidth even a little bit wider. So even when faced with chaos and a stressful situation, you can use some of those tools to actually like keep things regulated, to not get overwhelmed, and to manage the situation. So how can we change it so that we're in this window of tolerance? Well, the earlier you can spot it, when you or your child's out of the window of tolerance, the easier it is to shift. And tonight we're going to focus on parents. So you want to recognize when things are going well, and when you're managing and you're feeling good and you're on top of things. And then you also want to be able to identify when the management has been overwhelmed, when you're in a situation where you're just kind of playing whack-a-mole, and you're either too high or too low, and you're not quite feeling in control. So when things are feeling out of control, whether it's a specific situation or a number of situations, like if you feel like you're like over kind of a period of time, what you want to do is avoid adding to the system. So when you feel like you're getting very stressed and you're not sort of at your best, one of the things that you can do is to stop contributing into that system. So you want to kind of observe and maintain, but you don't want to kind of add more to it. You yourself need to step back and say, okay, you know what, maybe I'm trying to do too much here. I need to step back and simplify things to what I can control. And we'll talk a little bit about that. You want to connect with the people who are around you. Just let them know that they're here, that you're there, that they're available. If you're co-parenting, connect with your co-parent perhaps, connect with families. And that connection might simply be that you're available, that you're present, and that they're present. If you're interacting with somebody who themselves is dysregulated, you can connect with them, but you keep it simple. You don't want to be talking too much. If that individual is somebody who likes touch, you could just touch them and let them know that you're there, that you're kind of staying calm and quiet, and to help them kind of to know that you're present, but you're not going to add more to it. And then to let that person know if they're also stressed, that you can support them, that you're on their side. But really what you're doing is acknowledging your own stress and then trying to take yourself out of adding into that chaos. So we're going to talk about some specific strategies, what I'm going to call a stress toolbox. And I'm going to go through two different kinds of sets for this. So when you're feeling stressed and you identify it early, know when you can, when that's happening, and see if you can recruit help from somebody else. So if you feel like you're kind of getting a little bit out of kind of a controlled zone, saying to yourself, okay, I'm not actually thinking very well. I'm not thinking calmly. I'm going to actually try to take a break here and see whether or not, another adult or person might be able to step in. And if that's not possible, you can often just kind of step away, assuming the individuals that are safe, but there's lots of ways in which you can, have them safe and just say, you know what, I'm going to step away until things get a little bit better. More broadly, when you notice that things feel out of control, think about how you can reduce obligations and commitments. How can you simplify things? Maybe there's too much going on. Maybe you're doing too much. So perhaps you can give some tasks to somebody else and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on these, or let some things go and say, this is what's most important. Maybe everything doesn't need to get done. So what are the things that need to get done? And say no to some other things. Commitments are a great example. With COVID, things shut down and there was pros and cons to that, of course. But, sometimes we might say, oh, we got to go visit this person because we said we had to. When things are feeling stressed, remind yourself, you don't have to do that. Figure out what's most important. And you might decide, what's most important? What's most important is for us to have a day where we have less things that we need to do. And, maybe we don't need to rush out and grocery shop today. Maybe we'll, order in and I'll grocery shop tomorrow. Figure out how you can simplify things so that you decide what's key for you, but reduce the obligations. Scheduling downtime. So this could be with a family entirely or for yourself. And it can be as short as 10 minutes and it can be whatever you need, but giving yourself a time where that downtime will happen. A commitment to self-care. So figure out a time when you do something for yourself. And again, this can be kind of short and it can be longer. It could be 15 minutes reading a book or 10 minutes reading a book or whatever it is that you want to do. Maybe it's cooking, and maybe you need to recruit another parent or adult to help you do that, to say, you know what, I'm going to go do this and I need you to manage what's happening at home, but actually identify what that is, say it to yourself, say that it's something that you enjoy and dedicate the time to it. Social media and cutting back, we know that. But it is important. Eating is important. Eating healthy is important. Sleeping is important. And then creating an action plan. And we'll talk about creating an action plan. But I know we know this intellectually. You got to eat well, you got to exercise, you got to sleep well. And I think it's generally important, but in a time when you're feeling particularly stressed, you really need to make sure you get back to the basics there. And then when you get a situation back in this sort of comfort zone, you want to remember that prioritizing those things is important. Prioritizing sleep is important. And, sometimes you need to let one thing go to prioritize sleep. So, a concrete example would be, pull it from my own examples. Like last night I was helping my son with math and it was going a bit late, and I wanted him to get to sleep. I definitely wanted to get to sleep, and we made a decision. We're just going to finish it there. We've done some good work. Was it finished? No. Was it maybe not going to get handed in completely? No. But we've gotten the work done, and prioritizing sleep over getting it finished was important. So you can make decisions like that. And we know that, getting the math homework done was, not the end of the world. Honestly, it just wasn't. But both of us being exhausted all day today, it really probably could have been a problem and really was going to kind of exacerbate stress all the way around. But having an action plan is the most important thing, and we'll really kind of talk about that tonight. So this is more like in a situation with when things get stressful. So I'll go through these, but I'll come back to them. So 15 minutes a day when things are stressful, but for whenever, and it applies to youth, and sometimes it's harder with youth because how you connect with youth can look a little bit different. But 15 minutes a day where there's something that happens that is shared enjoyment, often driven by them. It can be driven by you perhaps, but if it's something that that you enjoy, it can be really important. With youth, it could be just watching a TV show with them. It could be, letting them show you their favorite TikTok videos. But something that's done together, that's not stressful, that does not include demands, that is intended for that purpose. And when you guard that time, guard it well. That's all that's happening there. So you just want to have no demands and have it as a positive time and be really creative around that. Trying to co-regulate. As parents, we know if we're stressed, kids can get stressed. If we're grumpy, they'll get grumpy. But be aware of that. So with my teenager who can be grumpy, sometimes I'll get grumpy, I'll go in the morning and be like, and I will be inclined to get that way, but then reminding myself that, okay, no, if I'm calm, and sometimes I'll just say like, hey, well, good morning. And sometimes then he can use that to regulate himself. And even if he doesn't, I still know that like that's me modeling kind of the way that helps us all be regulated. When things get tense, fewer words, always. Nobody can manage in a stressful situation. So this comes back to a previous point. When things get high, kind of trying to be calm and silent or less words makes a big difference. No parenting works well when like emotions are high. And so trying to implement that is not so helpful. And having an action plan. And so this point here is about sort of dealing with stressful events with kids, but in general, the key about a toolbox for parents and for kids is to have an action plan in place beforehand and practice it and know what it is, because we can't, one of the things about being stressed is that our memory and our attention, our bandwidth is reduced. So you want to have a toolkit that is automated, that you know what it is. You don't have to think about it. You actually know what the strategies are. All right. So as parents and humans, it's important to remember this link between thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. And when we're trying to reduce stress and to come up with ways in which to keep ourselves in this zone, it's always really important to remember that. Because if one of them is off kilter, the others get off kilter. Similarly, if we can manage one of them, we sometimes can manage the others. So stress comes from our perception of a situation. It might seem like it's the situation that's stressful, but it's that a situation isn't stressful. It's actually how we're feeling about it and our perceptions that make it stressful. Sometimes we're right and a situation is untenable and really out of control, but sometimes we're wrong, and usually it's somewhere in the middle. So a situation can have been really crummy and gone off the rails and be quite stressful, but in most situations, there is something about it that you can say and do that can help move it forward, and focusing on those parts of it are likely to help you manage your stress and get through the situation. So there's some common unhelpful patterns of thinking. So these are some of the things that we can get trapped in when we're feeling stressed. Okay, so all or none thinking. all or nothing thinking. So, you're trying to do something and something isn't going well, and to say to yourself, like, well, forget it, I just won't do anything. Overgeneralizing. Well, this happened this time, so now it's always going to happen. Jumping to conclusions. So, oh no, they forgot, like my youth forgot to hand in this assignment. That means they're going to fail the course, and I should have helped them. Filtering out the positives, which is going to be a big part of one of the strategies. So there's often positive things. As humans, it's our human nature to like just see the negatives, and you sort of push away the positives. You need to, like, that's one of the things that can prevent us from moving forward. Emotional reasoning, so coming up with ideas based on emotion. All the should statements, well, I should have done this and I should have done that, and if I'd only done this, then this would have gone better. And then personalization, which is really just saying that it's all your fault, that everything that has happened is your fault. So these patterns of thinking can really get us trapped and feel us more stressed in a situation. So these can interact with each other. This is what we call sort of like a triangle of thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So if you have a thought, it's all my fault, there's no point even trying, nothing I do is right, at the top there might lead me to feeling like I'm out of control, feel worthless, feel low. And then it might mean that I'll go home and I'll be like tired and I won't do anything. I won't respond to people. I won't go out and do the things that are going to help. So they have an impact on each other. And in the way that they can have a negative impact on each other, they can also have a positive impact on each other. So ways that we can use this triangle to reverse is remembering how we can counterbalance some of these ideas and thoughts that we have. So you want to focus on what you can control. Life is stressful. There are a lot of things that happen that we can't control. As parents, we would love to control them, but sometimes we just can't. We can make best plans and we can put certain things in place that we can control, but then things are going to happen. So when things are stressful, focus on the things that you can control, that are manageable and are doable for you. And keep in mind that point that I made earlier, that you don't want to take on too much. If you feel like there's lots of things you can control, but there's too many of them, then that's a bit of a house of cards. So you want to say, you want to prioritize what's important and put aside the things that maybe are not as important. You can control your reactions to events and people, and you can control your thoughts. These are 3 things that you can control. And when you're choosing what to do, what behaviors, you want to focus on the things that you have control over. By focusing on those things and doing them effectively, you can start to feel empowered and feel relief. So, last night with the math homework, so I could have focused on the fact that it didn't get done and why it's behind and didn't need a tutor, and like this is because during COVID we didn't do enough math. I could have catastrophized about that, and we didn't get it done because I'm so tired. Why am I so tired all the time? Or I could say, you know what, we got a lot of math done. He did a pretty good job. I think he's going to be okay. Tomorrow we're going to have to review it again, but I'm really glad we both got into bed because sleep is important. So that's me focusing on the areas that I can control, but also realizing that these were good decisions. You want to try to put out of your mind the things that are not in your control, because you can't control them, and that is hard. So how other people respond to you, how other people respond to your children, how other people feel. You cannot control those. And if you focus on them, they're going to make you feel anxious and stressed and hopeless. And so you need to put those aside, and you might need to actively say out loud to yourself, I cannot control how other people are acting, how they're feeling. There are times there are the things that you can control. Like one of the things you might be able to do, using an example of, like if you're trying to manage a stressful situation for your kids at school, maybe with another individual or with a friend, you may have no control over it. Or maybe it'll be like, you know what? I can't control how this person's feeling or how they responded, but maybe an action I can take is perhaps I do need to like connect with the teacher or the caregiver to see whether or not there are strategies in place that might be helpful to manage the situation. If it's something that's just totally out of your control and somebody else who's got their own thing to manage, then maybe the one thing you can control is the amount of time that is spent, with that person or around that person. And that's a good example of like making a choice for yourself. So maybe there's somebody who makes you feel very stressed out, who reacts all the time, maybe reacts negatively to you or about your children. And, maybe there's places that you end up going together and you might say to yourself, you know what, we're just not going to do that for a little while. We're going to take some family time, and this situation makes us all stressful for a range of reasons that we can't control. So, we're going to take a break from that in a polite way. So again, put aside the things that you can't control. Do not waste time thinking about them. Remember what you can control and come up with an action plan to make yourself feel empowered. Okay. So again, recognizing that your thoughts impact your behavior and emotions. You want to talk back to unhelpful thoughts. When you start to talk yourself down, to say negative things about yourself, you really need to actively counterbalance that with positive talk. You can either distract yourself and do something else, watch TV, or you can actively say things against it. You want to be responsive. So sometimes if a negative thought goes through my head or your head, you can be like, forget that, thinking about parents or other people's emotions. Like they got upset today. I can't control how they were feeling. And you want to say, you know what, I did my best. We have a plan. Think about something positive that happened, either about that encounter or about something else. You want to talk back. Or if those ideas are stuck in your head, do something else, a behavior, something that's going to stop that. Lots of people have, like I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep, and I can lie there and obsess about things, or I can read a book. That's a strategy that works for me. I use a Kobo. I don't even turn the light on. It prevents me from spiraling and thinking about these things. It's a strategy that I have. It's a behavior that's going to cut that out. So you can talk back to negative thoughts, or you can come up with a behavior that will prevent it. And sometimes you can just force an emotions. Go do something that you enjoy. Doing things that are enjoyable and having positive emotions can make things feel a lot better. So what are some of the strategies for coping stress? What is a coping strategy? So a coping strategy is a process to manage stressful situations. It's a deliberate and planned approach. The goal is to reduce, tolerate, and minimize stress. So you can come up with a strategy for a particular stressful situation or for a period of stress that you're experiencing. So it could be that you're stressed about something and you want to say, okay, this is stressing me out. Every time we go, it's causing stress for me. That's causing stress for my family, for my children, my youth. So you can have a plan for that, or you can have a plan in general. So when sometimes you get to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, it all feels out of control, you can come up with this plan to minimize the stress across the board. And it needs to be individualized, and it needs to change all the time. I know that sounds crazy, but I've got a couple of good examples for me. But whenever I'm thinking about it for myself or I'm talking about it to other people, I can give people a list of things that might be helpful, but you need to figure out what's helpful for you and try things out. And you want more than one thing. You want several things, because you might try one thing one day, and then when you go to the next day, it's not so helpful. So you want to have multiple things. Okay. So you want to create a coping strategy toolbox. So I like this here. It says it's real or imaginary box. Sometimes it can actually be things like I read a book. That's a thing. It's part of my toolbox. Or it can be a list of strategies that are successful for me. And, we can talk through what some of them are. So here's a list. I've touched on some of them and I'll give some other examples. But as I said, eating, drinking, moderation of things. Caffeine's good until you have too much. You want to make sure you're kind of staying in a zone that's good. You do want to sleep well, and when things get more stressful, sleep is more important, and you need to actively work on it. Exercise. So, exercise comes in many ways. Find things that are enjoyable. It can just be a walk around the block, honestly. And a walk around the block, assuming that there's people in your house are taken care of, can do wonders. It's kind of cold outside. You get the sensory feedback. You get a few minutes to yourself. It does get some exercise. If you're going to take a walk around the block, I'd say speed up the pace a little bit, and you can kind of get some of that a bit of your parasympathetic nervous system going. But it is important. And when some people say exercise, it doesn't have to be like get a gym membership and work out 5 days a week. Exercise literally can be a walk around the block, going up or down the stairs, walking around your house. Any of these activities is good. You do want to create time for yourself. I've already talked about that. Talking with friends, peers. You want to find the people who are positive, and sometimes you need to tell them what you need. So sometimes you don't want to talk about the stressful events in your life. You just want to hang out with them. Other times you do want to talk about the stressful things in your life, and maybe you want to tell them that too. But you need to rely on other adults and people that you feel close to. And sometimes when we're stressed, we kind of lose that a little bit, like we're doing all the stuff and getting all the stuff done and things are very busy and you're managing kind of kids and stressful situations. Step back and say, who are the people that I haven't connected with who I would like to connect with? Here's an example, and I think I actually have a slide about it. So sometimes they'll say like, write a journal or write a log. So that is definitely not my style. I do lots of writing for work, but it's not something that would help for me. It's a good example, but there are other things. So sometimes people will say have a log or a journal, but for me, it's actually just like a cognitive list. So like going for a walk and saying, okay, like that's, you might work through a situation that didn't go as planned. And then, like, what are the things that did go well? What are some of the positive things? What am I going to do next time? So you can write in a journal to help you do that. You can just read a book. You can draw. There's different things that people can do. Some people like to cook. You just want to find something that's going to help you decompress. Sometimes you can pair enjoyable activities with less enjoyable activities. But most importantly, reward yourself for the things that you do for yourself. So all of these are very important. I think sometimes people think, oh, self-care, I don't have time for that. But back to the beginning of this, when parents are stressed, the sort of whole situation becomes wobbly. It is important. You do need to prioritize it. If you prioritize it, the other stressful situations that are thrown your way, you can manage better. So acknowledging that, making time, and rewarding yourself for it. And as I said, with my example of sleeping last night, I could have obsessed on not getting the math done, or I could have said to myself, you know what? It's great. You got to sleep. I got to sleep. Sleep is really important. That's a good job for all of us. We're all going to be able to manage the day better tomorrow. All right. So this was brainstorming. So I think we did have this up there, but people can think about it. What are some activities that you already do to reduce stress? But after tonight, honestly, I think what you want to do is come up with 5 things that are small that you do that can be done in your house or on the go that can reduce stress of the kind that we've talked about. It could be things that you can say to yourself, taking 15 minutes, what do you enjoy to do? What are the things that can help you? If you wake up in the middle of the night, what are you going to do? Having 4 or 5 things that can be helpful and in your toolbox. So this was the stress log. I was joking about it. So this is very helpful for some people. It's not a strategy that I personally use, although the steps that are in it, you could definitely use. So this is sort of reflecting on what happened. So you want to reflect on what's stressful for you and see if you can manage that. And that's different for everybody. But, identifying what it was in a particular situation. You want to then help build awareness of how you react to stress. What does that look like for you? What do you do when you're stressed? And the reason why identifying what you do when you're stressed is important, because you can often, that's earlier in the stage. The sooner in a stage that you employ a strategy for managing, and the more effective it's going to be. So if the first thing that happens to you when you get stressed is you clench your teeth or like your neck starts to hurt, be aware of that, because that's a tell that things are maybe you need to kind of double down on some of your strategies. You can identify common themes and circumstances that can be stressful, either plan to manage them or see if you can kind of come up with approaches to minimize them. And it can help you plan for next steps of how to deal with that situation when it comes up, and then think about what your strengths are and what the challenges might be. So remind yourself, what am I good at? What am I doing? What's in place? And what's going to be hard about a particular situation? But, some anecdotal examples of this, like it's funny what things like really drive like something might really drive you crazy, and it seems like a small thing, but if you don't have to do it, then it's actually, it is a stress relief for you. It takes one thing out. Like maybe it's folding laundry. Like maybe it's your task in your family to fold laundry and it's making you crazy. And maybe if you've got a co-parent, you say to them, you know what, like I need to switch. I'll do something else, but I need you to be on top of laundry for a while. Another example that a parent had given me was, they had lots of little kids. It was like picking up kids from school. So 2 or 3 kids after school, parents were there, kids were there. Like it just threw off this parent's whole day. And they decided, you know what, they hired a neighborhood teenager to pick up their kids and walk them home. And she said it like changed everything about how she was able to like receive the kids and talk to them when they came home. And it totally altered sort of the rest of the day. So if there is something that you're aware of that is like really kind of throws you off, see if there's a way that you can manage it. All right, so controlled and deep breathing. So the reason why earlier I had talked about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is, it's easy for people to say like, take some deep breaths. But when this is done correctly, and it is actually deep breathing and controlled breathing, and you can find strategies for this, if you take very deep breaths, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It actually makes your body start to calm down. It is one strategy, so it is worth investing some time in learning how to do it. And the key is you need to really deeply breathe, and you need to get right to the bottom for this to work. But it's not just about the breathing. It actually activates a physiological response in your body. It works very well. There are some other kinds of things you can do that are helpful. So if breathing is not your thing, you can use some strategies. Sometimes people call it grounding. So for me, sometimes walking around the block, like a bit of cold air. Sometimes people will get like a cooler pack from the freezer. You can put it on your hands or actually put it under your feet. Some of these things actually can trigger the body to, in fact, start to go down into this kind of calm down mode, and it can be helpful. But I always like to tell people that this is not just about, take 10 deep breaths. It's actually about physiologically triggering a response in your body that is automated that will help you calm down. Similarly, progressive muscle relaxation. There are great techniques for this. It can be very helpful. Visualization. So one of the strategies I would say here is that when you're really stressed, it's hard for you to come up with some of these kind of what you're going to do. So if you have something to visualize or something that you should pre-plan it, is there a memory? Sometimes people can use a movie or a TV show. If you feel like you can't visualize something calming, then visualize something that you know well that's enjoyable. It's really an act of kind of getting your mind off of things and trying to relax. But it should be something soothing and calm and not stressful and not trigger you back into it. But knowing beforehand what you're going to use before a stressful situation will make it much more likely that you can use it, and having 2 or 3 things can be helpful. So this is sort of thought stopping, this idea of stopping those negative thoughts. So when you start these sort of like cognitive distortions, and we've all had them, like, I can't do anything, you need to be aware of that and stop it. So you need to say, no, I need to focus on what I can control and what's going well. That these all or nothing ideas are not going to be helpful. So you can use a trigger word in your mind to stop. You can, there's different strategies that you can use, but you want to replace it with a more helpful thought. So what's something you can do? This situation would be easier to manage if I did this. You know what? I'm doing the best that I can, and then reminding yourself of a few things that have gone well and that you are in control of, and then maybe thinking about what you're going to do next. One concrete thing that you're going to do that day or the next day that is going to be maybe not helpful to that situation, but in general. And as I said, my example for last night was, you know what? This wasn't ideal, but we're going to, like, the one thing we're going to do before the end of this night is just make sure that everyone gets a good night's sleep. And when I got into bed, rather than obsessing about not getting the homework done, saying to myself, you know what, we got into bed, this is great, we're going to have a good night's sleep. And in that situation, if I wasn't able to sleep, I'm going to read my book. to try to help myself get to sleep and not just lie here and obsess about things. All right. So you want to acknowledge when you're kind of getting these thoughts that aren't helpful, stop the thought, and impose that. So you also need to talk positively to yourself. Like, what is going well? You need to find some motivating statements. Sometimes they can be cheesy. You need to figure out what one works for you. Okay. Sometimes it can be a joke. Sometimes it can be an idea, but you do need to come up with a positive statement about yourself. So, you know what? We're all working together to make this situation as best as possible. I'm doing my best. I'm working hard. You need to have these positive statements for yourself that work. Maybe it's like, you know what? Things are kind of crazy, but at least I'm like keeping a good sense of humor. At least, I can laugh about things. You want to remind yourself what is going well and what are the positive attributes of yourself. And you want to have those queued up for when the situation is stressful. And so like an example here, I need to get all of this done or it's all going to fall apart. So that's like feeling overwhelmed and all in none thinking. Instead say, you know what? I did a great job of getting this done this week. So for example, like this week, I did a great job of making sure everyone got into bed on time. So check for that. And maybe other stuff fell apart, but that is one thing that went well. Okay. So you want to be able to come up with positive self-statements and actually be able to counterbalance the negative statements with something that actually has gone well, that is true about yourself. And when things are calm and good, make sure that you're thinking about those and queuing them up for when things are stressful and the chips are down. So active listening, this is more around a communication technique, but it's helpful for you to mirror in others and back and forth. So a little bit of this is, building relationships and sending messages of respects around thoughts and experiences of others. Often as parents, we want to fix things, and sometimes we can, but sometimes we just need to receive the information. We can't always fix things for our kids. We can't always fix things for ourselves. And sometimes when we talk to other people, we're not expecting them to fix it for us. So sometimes they just want to tell you about something and explain their feelings and how they think about it. And you want to have people in your world who you can do the same thing for. Okay. So active listening involves listening to the content of the conversation, as well as being aware of the feelings and the nonverbal cues that they're sending to you. And also you want to have other people do that for you. So like if you're interacting with your kids, I finally finished all my work. One option could be, great, now you can go clean up, or great, finally, now you can do more. But, an active listener who's acknowledging all the emotions that go along with that, it might be like, acknowledge what they've shared with you. That must feel relieved. That was a lot of work. And how can you be aware of the situation and reflect back to them what they're communicating to you? It's really a reflection back to them. And down the line, there might be time for some of the other comments as well, but be present and model that for the people who are around you. And if there's people around you, help them, like say to them, this is what I need right now. I need you just to listen to what's going on. Okay. This is communication techniques. I don't know if we need to go through this, but I did pull this in here. So this is more about how you could talk to other people, but I actually put this in here also as an example of positive self-talk to ourselves. And again, I've brought this up a few times, but an observation of what is going well, and you can do this for somebody else, or you can do it for yourself. But assume you're in a stressful situation that you're finding stressful, and maybe your child or youth is finding stressful. So you can identify like what did go well in that situation. It might feel like nothing went well, but maybe there were things that went well, you want to think about, well, what's the next step? Like, what are we going to do now? And maybe it's not about fixing the situation, but it could just be what is going to happen next. Like, what's the action that we can control? What is the thing that we actually have control over, and what's going to happen? But there is often things that did go well, and acknowledge them and focus on those. You want to give praise and encouragement. Nobody wants to feel like there's no solution to something. It might be something small and it may not be a solution, but it's an action that's going to happen next. Like, you know what, today was kind of a crummy day. Using the math example again, like we didn't get all the math done today, but we did a lot of good work. And you know what, like tomorrow, let's just get started earlier, and I bet you we can get it finished. So like, what did get done, and what's like an encouragement? How can we leave this situation with sort of a positive idea about how we can be in control? And this one here is what we call the praise sandwich. And this is an example of talking to somebody else, and I'll go through this, but then I want us all to think about how we can practice on ourselves. So the example here is, nice job speaking right at eye level with JC. Next time you might think about using a softer voice. I really liked how you gave her a high five at the end. So this is how you kind of start off with something positive, give a piece of advice, and start off with something positive again. But you can do this to yourself, right? So, you know, if it was like an interaction with you know, your teen, if you're reflecting afterwards, you know, it was like, it was good that I went to talk to him about, you know, being behind in math homework. Like maybe next time I could be a little less edgy in how I'm talking about it. But you know what, ultimately at the end, I reminded him that he seems like he's working really hard, and that's good. So remind yourself, it's okay to reflect on what you could do better, but you also need to be able to acknowledge what's going well, and also to give yourself a break and to give yourself some encouragement and praise.